This all became official within the last 20 minutes or so. Representative David Sawyer, a Democrat who represents Tacoma, is out as committee chair of the Gaming and Commerce Committee. He is still a state representative, though. An investigator said they found a, quote, pattern of actions by Sawyer toward House staff that created a hostile work environment. And investigators also revealed that his story kept changing throughout what has been a 2-month-long investigation. One accuser who went public earlier this year said she's been waiting for this day for years.
It was very clear that I was not looking for a romantic relationship.
Newly engaged in 2011, Jessica Gavry's second love was politics, working on campaigns for Democrats in Pierce County. She considered David Sawyer, a future candidate, an acquaintance she was friendly to at events. But she says he repeatedly asked her out.
Probably within like a year of us meeting, I began to get text messages from him late at night asking me to go out for drinks, saying, you know, you want to have a drink with me. I was embarrassed. I felt like I had probably done something to make him think that it was okay to text me at 11 o'clock at night.
Not related to the criminal element.
In 2012, Sawyer was elected representative, later chairing the Commerce and Gaming Committee. But earlier this year, following the Me Too movement, several women, including Gavry, reported alleged inappropriate conduct by Sawyer before and after he got to Olympia. Fellow House Democrats started an investigation and say preliminary results proved some of the allegations were credible. So today, members held closed-door meetings to discuss removing Sawyer as the Commerce and Gaming Committee chair.
I would not have, as a member of leadership, made a recommendation if I wasn't concerned. Our primary responsibility here is to make sure we have a safe work environment.
Sawyer's attorney said it's deeply troubling legislators are not waiting until the investigation is complete to take action, adding that Sawyer has never been accused of touching any of the accusers. And in a letter, the attorney said Sawyer remains, quote, surprised and saddened that the women say his conduct made them uncomfortable.
I think it's super important what they're doing today.
Gavry hopes Sawyer is punished.
I mean, I think it sends a really clear message to other women, right? That they're going to take allegations seriously, that that the culture's changing, that there's a reason to share your story because there will be consequences.
Again, Representative Sawyer remains in office. He's up for re-election this fall. That accuser says she will be campaigning against him this fall in the election. Now, Sawyer was invited to today's discussion and debate here at the state capitol, but he did not attend. He and the other members were allowed to vote on this matter via email. It is not clear if he actually submitted a vote. This investigation is supposed to be all wrapped up by the end of the month, so another 3 weeks or so, but the leadership there in the House Democratic Caucus said they couldn't afford to wait that long to take any action after they started to allegedly confirm some of these allegations. Live in Olympia, Drew Mickelson, King 5 News.